Imagine a night in 1347 where the air is thick with the scent of damp stone and fear. You're standing in the shadows of a crumbling cathedral, its gargoyles leering down like guardians of a forbidden truth. A hooded figure slips you a tattered parchment, its edges burned, its words barely legible in the moonlight. It speaks of rituals so dark, so profane, they were erased from every holy book, whispered only in the deepest corners of the medieval world. You weren't meant to see this. No one was. But now you hold the key to a history the church buried, a history of sex, power and control that shaped the souls of millions. This is no fairy tale. It's a descent into the abyss of human desire, where the bedroom was a battlefield and every act a rebellion against God himself. Before we plunge into these forbidden stories of survival and suffering, if you're drawn to the hidden truths of history, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that pulls back the veil. Comment below with where you're watching from. Let's build a global tribe of truth seekers, connected across time by our hunger for the secrets they tried to erase. Let's step into the world of Margot, a 15-year-old bride in a muddy village in medieval Europe. Her marriage to Henrik, a man twice her age, wasn't born of love, but of barter, 3 pigs and a scrap of land. Her trembling hands clutch a woolen shift, passed down from her mother, stained with the weight of generations. Outside, the village men pound pots, their drunken shouts a cruel chorus demanding proof of her submission. This wasn't intimacy, it was a transaction, a public spectacle where her body was the currency of honour. The church loomed over every moment, its rules etched into the minds of the faithful. Sex was a sin unless it served God's purpose. Deviation meant damnation. Margot's fear wasn't just of Henrik's rough hands, it was of an entire system that owned her soul. The medieval bedroom was no sanctuary. It was a stage where the church, the village and ancient superstitions held court. The bedding ceremony, a ritual as old as the hills, saw the couple dragged to their chamber, stripped by leering guests and watched until the marriage was consummated. The bloodied sheet, proof of Margot's virginity, would be paraded like a war banner. If it failed to appear, she could be cast out, branded a whore or worse, killed for defrauding her new family. Some girls, desperate, pricked their fingers or smuggled animal blood to fake the evidence. This wasn't just about sex, it was about power over women, over families, over the very soul of a community. The church's grip was iron. St. Jerome, a ghost from the 4th century, declared that loving your wife too passionately was adultery against God. Thomas Aquinas, the theologian king of the 13th century, laid down the law in his Summa Theologica. Sex was permitted only for procreation, only on certain days, only in the missionary position. Stray from this, say on a Forbidden Wednesday during Lent, and you risked eternal fee, oral bon sex, forbidden, sex during menstruation, a sin so vile it could poison crops. The church calculated a mere 50 days a year were safe for intimacy. Every touch, every glance carried the weight of divine judgment. Margot's mother whispered these rules, learned in the confessional, where priests probed every detail of private life, turning desire into shame. But beneath this suffocating dogma, a darker truth pulsed. The church wasn't just controlling bodies, it was waging a war on the human spirit. Medieval sexuality was a psychological cage designed to break the will. Women were property, their value tied to their virginity, their wombs a battlefield for family honour. Men too were trapped, their manhood measured by their ability to dominate, to produce heirs, to prove their virility in a world that watched their every move. The church's obsession with purity wasn't about holiness, it was about control, about ensuring no one dared question the divine order. Yet, in the shadows, rebellion simmered. People craved connection, pleasure, defiance, even at the cost of their souls. This wasn't just ignorance. Medieval scholars, leaning on warped Greek and Roman texts, believed women were defective men. Their vaginas inverted penises, their pleasure a medical necessity for conception. This led to a chilling belief. A woman who conceived after rape must have enjoyed it, for her body wouldn't have allowed it otherwise. In courts, this logic turned victims into accomplices, their suffering dismissed as consent. Margot's world was built on these lies, where her body wasn't hers but a vessel for God, family, and village. Her fear wasn't just of pain, it was of a system that erased her humanity. And yet the human spirit fought back. In the forests, away from the church's eyes, Wise women, later burned as witches, passed down forbidden knowledge. They brewed teas from pennyroyal and tansy to prevent pregnancy. Though a wrong dose could kill, they carved mandrake roots, believed to boost fertility, and sold them at markets where the church's spies lurked. These women weren't just healers, they were rebels, defying a system that branded their bodies as dangerous. Their rituals, blending pagan roots with Christian symbols, were a quiet war against the church's stranglehold. A woman might pray to St. Margaret for safe childbirth while burying an amulet under her threshold, a secret act of defiance against a god who seemed to hate her. The medieval world was a paradox, a place where sex was both sacred and profane, where desire was a sin, but procreation a duty. The church's rules were meant to crush the human spirit, but they couldn't. People found ways to resist, to love, to feel, even in a world that punished them for it. Margot's trembling hands, Henrik's calloused fingers, these were not just the meeting of two bodies, but the collision of a culture's deepest fears and desires. This is the truth they didn't want you to know. Medieval sexuality wasn't just about bizarre rituals. It was about power, who wielded it, who suffered under it, and who dared to fight back. As we descend deeper into this forbidden history, you're not just watching a story, you're uncovering a truth that changes how you see the world. The medieval bedroom was a microcosm of a larger war, one that's still being fought today. Every rule, every ritual, was a chain forged to bind the human soul. But chains can be broken. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. The deeper we go, the more dangerous this knowledge becomes. Are you ready to see what they hid from you? You're standing at the edge of a forbidden truth, one the medieval church burned books to hide. Picture a world where every whisper of desire could damn your soul, where the act of love was a rebellion against an all-seeing God. The parchment in your hands trembles as you read of rituals so twisted, so drenched in fear and power, they feel like a fever dream. But this was real. Men and women like Margot and Henrik, caught in a web of control that turned their bodies into pawns in a cosmic game. You're not just learning history, you're unearthing a secret that could unravel the way you see power, desire, and the human soul. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. The medieval world wasn't just a prison of rules, it was a labyrinth of terror, where sex was weaponized to keep people in line. The church didn't just dictate what you could do in bed, it invaded your mind, planting seeds of guilt that grew into nightmares. Demons, they said, lurked in every lustful thought. The succubus, a female demon with eyes like burning coals, could seduce a man in his sleep, stealing his seed to spawn cursed children. The incubus, a male demon with a grip like iron, could overpower a woman, leaving her tainted by sin. These weren't just stories, they were preached as fact, written in medical texts, debated in universities. If you woke paralyzed, a weight on your chest, it wasn't a quirk of sleep, it was a demonic assault. Confessionals became interrogation chambers, where priests demanded every detail of your dreams, your desires, your most private moments. Refused to answer, and you risked being branded a witch, your body burned to save your soul. This fear wasn't accidental, it was a psychological cage, forged to keep men and women trembling under the church's shadow. For men, sexual failure was a public shame. Impotence wasn't just a private struggle. It could ruin your reputation, mark you as less than a man. A knight who couldn't perform might lose his standing, his honour, his power. For women, the stakes were even higher. A whisper of impropriety could destroy a family's name. A girl seen talking to a man not her kin could be labelled a whore, her life reduced to exile or death. The church's rules weren't about purity. They were about control, about ensuring no one dared question the divine hierarchy where men ruled women and God ruled all. But the church wasn't the only power in play. The medieval nobility wielded sex as a tool of domination, their private chambers a world apart from the peasant's straw bed. Lords and ladies had access to luxuries, spiced wine, silken sheets, and time to indulge in pleasures the church condemned. Their marriage manuals, hidden from the masses, detailed techniques for pleasure, positions forbidden to the common folk. Andreas Capellanus, a 12th century poet, wrote of courtly love, a code where desire was a spiritual quest, a dangerous secret among the elite. These nobles weren't just defying the church, they were crafting a parallel world where pleasure was power and power was everything. Yet even they weren't free. Discovery meant excommunication, exile or a traitor's death. Every act of defiance was a gamble with eternity. Meanwhile, the peasantry fought their own battles. In villages like Margot's, privacy was a myth. Homes were cramped, walls thin, filled with children, servants, and kin. Sex was never private. Every moan, every creak of the bed was overheard, judged, reported. The community enforced its own surveillance, neighbours spying for the church, ready to denounce anyone who strayed. Yet in the shadows, rebellion bloomed. May Day, a festival cloaked in Christian veneer, was a pagan holdover where young people slipped into the forests, free from prying eyes. They danced, coupled, defied the rules. Many a child was conceived under those moonlit trees, a silent middle finger to the church's iron grip. These weren't just acts of lust, they were acts of survival, of claiming a piece of humanity in a world that sought to crush it. Halfway through this descent, I need you to do something. Comment below with the phrase, "I see the truth," twice. It's not just for the algorithm, it's a signal to yourself, a mark that you're waking up to the hidden forces that shaped our past and still echo today. Say it, and you're not just a viewer, you're part of this rebellion, part of the unveiling. Now, let's talk about the rituals that bound sex to the supernatural. Medieval people believed their acts could sway the cosmos. Kings consulted astrologers to time their couplings, convinced the stars would shape their heirs' destinies. Armies were ordered to abstain before battle, lest sex sap their strength. Fertility rituals, half pagan, half Christian, were everywhere. Brides were showered with grain to ensure pregnancy. Beds were sprinkled with holy water and secret herbs. Mandrake roots shaped like tiny humans were worn as amulets, their power so coveted that fakes flooded markets. These weren't just superstitions, they were desperate attempts to control a world where death was always near. 1 in 3 women died in childbirth, their bodies broken by a system that valued their wombs over their lives. Unmarried mothers faced exile or execution, their babies often left to die. Infanticide, though condemned, was a grim reality, a last resort for women with no other way out. The church's obsession with control extended to the body itself. Menstruation was a curse, a monthly reminder of Eve's sin. They called it poison, said it could kill crops, dull knives, drive dogs mad. Women on their cycles were banished to huts outside the village, barred from churches, forbidden to touch food or sacred objects. Physicians, steeped in nonsense, claimed unexpelled menstrual blood could poison a woman from within. Their cures, bloodletting, toxic potions, or, most chillingly, sex to balance her humours. Meanwhile, women developed their own secrets. Moss and rags for protection, herbal teas to ease pain, lunar cycles to track their bodies. This knowledge, passed mother to daughter, was a quiet act of defiance, a reclamation of power in a world that sought to strip it away. The legal system was no kinder. Rape wasn't a crime against a woman, but against the man who owned her, father, husband, lord. A noble who raped a peasant might pay a fine. A peasant who raped a noble woman faced torture and death. Adultery was a woman's crime, punishable by death if caught, while men roamed free, bedding servants or prostitutes without consequence. Brothels, though condemned by the church, were regulated by towns, their workers forced into distinctive clothes and regular inspections. The droit du seigneur, the rumoured right of lords to claim a bride's first night, may be debated by historians, but its legend speaks to a brutal truth. Peasant women were powerless, their bodies a feudal tax. This was a world where desire was dangerous, but it burned anyway. People found ways to resist, through secret rituals, forbidden loves, whispered rebellions. They carved out moments of humanity in a system built to crush it. Margot, standing in that candlelit room, wasn't just a bride. She was a soldier in a war she didn't choose. Her body the battleground, her spirit the prize. The church, the nobles, the village, they all wanted control. But the human soul is stubborn. It fights back. And as we plunge deeper, you'll see how far that fight went, how much blood was spilled, how many secrets were buried to keep you from knowing the truth. Stay with me. The rabbit hole is only getting deeper. You're holding a secret now, one that could have gotten you burned at the stake 700 years ago. The parchment in your hands, its ink faded but heavy with truth, reveals a world where every touch was a rebellion, every desire a defiance of a system designed to crush you. The medieval church didn't just control bodies, It owned minds, twisting love into guilt, pleasure into sin. You're not just watching history unfold, you're stepping into a forbidden realm where men and women like Margot fought for their humanity against a machine of fear and power. This knowledge is dangerous, it changes you, rewires how you see the world. Keep going, because the deeper we dive, the more you'll see the chains that still bind us. In the medieval world, sex wasn't just personal, it was political, a weapon wielded by those in power to keep everyone else in line. The church's rules, preached from pulpits and enforced through confession, were a psychological stranglehold. Priests didn't just hear sins, they demanded details. Every position, every sensation, every stray thought. These confessions weren't private. They were intelligence-gathering missions, feeding a network of informants who reported to bishops and inquisitors. By the 13th century, the Inquisition turned this into an art form. Suspected heretics weren't just questioned about their beliefs, they were tortured into confessing their sexual habits. Manuals for inquisitors listed questions so invasive they'd make your skin crawl. What position did you use? How often? Did you feel pleasure? This wasn't about saving souls, it was about breaking them, about making people so afraid of their own bodies they'd never dare rebel. For men, the pressure was relentless. Sexual prowess was tied to honour, to manhood itself. A man who couldn't perform wasn't just failing his wife, he was failing his community, his lord, his god. Impotence was a public humiliation, whispered about in taverns, mocked in crude songs. The French developed a whole vocabulary of shame for it, words that cut deeper than any sword. Nobles faced their own trials. A knight's virility was his currency, lose it, and you lost your place among the elite. Yet even the powerful weren't free. The church watched them too, ready to excommunicate anyone who strayed too far into pleasure. The nobility's private chambers, with their silken sheets and sourced wine, were a facade. Behind closed doors they were as trapped as the peasants, their every move weighed against the threat of eternal fire. Women, though, bore the brunt of this control. Their bodies were battlegrounds, their sexuality a public commodity. Virginity was a family's wealth, traded like gold in marriage negotiations. Margot's father didn't just give her to Henrik, he sold her purity, her hymen a contract sealed in blood. The wedding night wasn't hers, it belonged to the village, the church, the men outside banging pots, waiting for proof she'd fulfilled her role. If the sheets weren't stained red, she could be cast out, her family disgraced, her life forfeit. Some women, desperate, used tricks, chicken blood, a pricked finger, to fake virginity. But the church's understanding of the body was a lie. They thought the hymen was a solid wall, its absence proof of sin, when in truth it could break from riding a horse or simply not exist at all. This wasn't ignorance, it was a deliberate weapon, turning women's bodies against them, making their natural state a source of shame. The church's control extended to the supernatural. Sexual demons weren't just folklore, they were a tool of terror. The succubus and incubus, preached as real, were blamed for every forbidden thought, every nocturnal emission, every dream you couldn't control. A woman who woke gasping, feeling a weight on her chest, wasn't suffering sleep paralysis. She was a victim of demonic assault, or worse, a willing participant. The line between victim and witch was razor thin. Many were burned for it, their screams a warning to others. Stay in line or this is your fate. Men weren't spared either. A man who confessed to impure dreams could be flogged, forced to fast, or worse, accused of consorting with demons. The church's obsession with demons wasn't about protecting people, it was about keeping them terrified, their minds as chained as their bodies. Yet in this suffocating world, rebellion thrived. In the forests, under the cover of night, people defied the church's rules. May Day wasn't just a festival, it was a middle finger to the priests, a night when young men and women slipped away to couple in the shadows, free from surveillance. These encounters weren't just about lust, they were about reclaiming power, about stealing a moment of humanity from a system that sought to crush it. Wise women, branded witches by the church, were the keepers of this rebellion. They taught girls how to brew teas that could prevent pregnancy, how to track their cycles by the moon, how to ease the pain of a body the church called cursed. These women weren't just healers, they were warriors, fighting a silent war against a system that hated them. Their knowledge, passed in whispers, was a lifeline for women like Margot, trapped in a world that saw their bodies as property. The legal system was another chain. Rape wasn't a crime. Or was a crime against a woman, but against her owner, her father, husband, or lord. A noble could rape a peasant and pay a fine. A peasant who touched a noble woman faced torture and death. Adultery was a woman's sin, punishable by death, while men could bed servants or prostitutes with no consequence. Brothels, though condemned by the church, were regulated by towns, their workers marked like cattle, forced to wear special clothes and submit to inspections. The droit du seigneur, whether real or myth, was a chilling symbol of this power imbalance, lords claiming the bodies of peasant brides as their right. This wasn't just about sex, it was about domination, about reminding the powerless who ruled them. Halfway through this journey, I need you to lock in. Comment, "I see the truth" twice below. It's not just for engagement, it's a declaration, a step toward awakening. You're not just watching, you're joining a rebellion against the lies that shaped our past and still haunt our present. The nobility, for all their privilege, weren't free either. Their marriage manuals, hidden from the masses, spoke of pleasure in ways that would have shocked the church. Andreas Capellanus wrote of courtly love, a code where desire was a noble quest, but it was a dangerous game. Discovery meant ruin, excommunication, exile, death. Even the elite lived in fear, their private chambers a stage for defiance, but also a trap. The church's spies were everywhere, ready to report any hint of unnatural acts. The missionary position wasn't just preferred, it was the only one that wouldn't damn you. Anything else, woman on top rear entry, was a sin, a rebellion against God's order. Yet medieval literature, like the Bordi Fabliaux, hints at a secret world where people experimented, laughed, loved, despite the risks. This was a world where desire was a battle, and every act of rebellion came at a cost. Margot, standing in her candlelit cottage, wasn't just a bride. She was a soldier, her body the battlefield, her spirit the prize. The church, the nobles, the village, they all wanted control, but the human soul is stubborn. It fights back, even when the odds are impossible. As we plunge deeper, you'll see how far that fight went, how much blood was spilled to keep these truths hidden. You're not just learning history, you're uncovering a war that's still being fought, in your mind, in your body, in the world around you. Stay with me. The truth is dangerous, but it's worth it. The parchment in your hands burns with secrets, rituals, desires, and rebellions the church tried to erase with fire and blood. You're not just a spectator, you're a keeper of forbidden knowledge, standing at the edge of a chasm where sex was both a sin and a weapon, where every act of love was a defiance of a system built to crush the human spirit. This isn't just history, it's a mirror, reflecting the chains that still bind us, the lies that still shape us. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the more you'll see the world for what it really is. The medieval world was a machine of control, and sex was its most powerful lever. The church didn't just regulate bodies, it colonized minds, turning desire into a battlefield where souls were won or lost. Confession wasn't a private ritual, it was a surveillance state. Priests armed with manuals listing every possible sin interrogated men and women about their most intimate moments. Did you enjoy it too much? Did you stray from the natural position? Did you think forbidden thoughts? These questions weren't about salvation, they were about power, about making people so afraid of their own desires they'd police themselves. By the 13th century, the Inquisition turned this into a nightmare. Suspected heretics were tortured not just for their beliefs, but for their sexual practices, their bodies broken to extract confessions of unnatural acts. The interrogator's obsession with detail, positions, frequency, sensations, fueled as a twisted fascination, a hypocrisy cloaked immodesty. This wasn't about God, it was about control. For men, the pressure was a crucible. Sexual prowess wasn't just personal, it was a public performance tied to honour, status and power. A man who failed in bed was no man at all. Impotence was a scandal mocked in tavern songs, whispered in markets, a stain that could ruin a knight's reputation or a peasant's standing. The nobility faced their own trials. Their marriage manuals, locked away from the masses, described techniques for pleasure that would have horrified the church. But even they weren't free. A nobleman caught indulging in sinful acts risked excommunication, his power stripped, his name erased. The church's spies were everywhere, turning private chambers into stages for judgment. The missionary position wasn't just a preference, it was a mandate, the only act that didn't risk your soul. Anything else, woman on top, rear entry, was a rebellion against God's order, a sin that could burn you for eternity. Women, though, were the true casualties. Their bodies were property, their sexuality a public commodity. Margot's marriage to Enric wasn't a union of hearts, but a contract, her virginity the price of her family's honour. The wedding night was a spectacle, the bloodied sheet a trophy waved before the village to prove her worth. If it didn't appear, she could be cast out, branded a whore, or killed. The church's lies about the hymen, a solid barrier, its absence proof of sin, turned women's bodies into evidence against them. In truth, the hymen could break from labour, riding, or natural variation, but truth didn't matter. Control did. Women lived in constant fear, their every move watched, their reputations fragile as glass. A glance, a word, a moment alone with a man could destroy them. Adultery was a woman's crime, punishable by death, while men faced no such penalty. A husband could kill his cheating wife and her lover with impunity, his honour intact, his power unquestioned. Yet in this suffocating world, rebellion burned. The forests were a refuge, a place where the church's eyes couldn't reach. May Day, cloaked in Christian trappings, was a pagan rebellion where young people slipped away to love freely, their bodies defying the rules that bound them. Wise women, branded witches, were the architects of this resistance. They taught girls to brew teas from pennyroyal or tansy, risking death to control their fertility. They tracked cycles by the moon, used herbs to ease pain, and passed down secrets that gave women a shred of power in a world that hated them. These weren't just acts of survival, they were acts of war. A quiet uprising against a system that saw women as vessels, not souls. The church condemned them as heretics, but their knowledge was a lifeline, a whisper of freedom in a world of chains. Halfway through this descent, I need you to stand with me. Comment, I see the truth twice below. It's not just for the algorithm, it's a vow, a mark that you're waking to the forces that shaped our past and still lurk today. You're not just watching, you're claiming your place in this rebellion. The supernatural was another weapon. The church preached that demons, succubi and incubi, hunted in the night, seducing men and women to steal their souls. These weren't myths, they were tools of terror, blamed for every stray desire, every dream you couldn't control. A man who woke with impure thoughts was guilty, his body a traitor. A woman who felt a weight in the night wasn't a victim of sleep paralysis, she was a witch, consorting with demons. Many were burned for it. Their death's a warning, obey or burn. This fear wasn't random, it was engineered to keep people small, afraid, obedient. The church's obsession with demons wasn't about protection, it was about domination, about making you fear your own mind. The legal system was just as brutal. Rape was a crime against a woman's owner, her father, husband, or lord. Not her. A noble could rape a peasant and pay a fine. A peasant who touched a noblewoman faced torture and death. Brothels, though condemned, were regulated. Their workers marked like livestock, forced into special clothes and inspections. The droit du seigneur, whether real or legend, was a chilling reminder of feudal power, lords claiming peasant brides as their right. Sex was a hierarchy, with the powerful at the top and the powerless crushed beneath. Yet in the shadows, people fought back. The fabliaux, bawdy tales told in taverns, mocked the church's rules, celebrating forbidden acts with laughter and defiance. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were rebellion, proof that the human spirit could not be fully chained. Fertility rituals, half pagan, half Christian, were another act of resistance. Brides were showered with grain, beds blessed with herbs, all to defy a world where childbirth was a death sentence for 1 in 3 women. The church called it witchcraft, but peasants clung to these rituals, desperate to control a world that offered none. Mandrake roots, believed to boost fertility, were so prized that fakes flooded markets. These acts weren't just about survival, they were about hope, about stealing power from a system that sought to crush it. Margot, trembling in her candlelit cottage, wasn't just a bride, she was a warrior, her body the battlefield, her spirit the prize. The church, the nobles, the village, they all wanted her soul, but the human heart is stubborn. It fights, and as we plunge deeper you'll see the cost of that fight, the blood spilled to keep these truths hidden. You're not just learning, you're awakening. Stay with me, the truth is a blade and it cuts deep. You've crossed the threshold now, holding a truth so dangerous it could have set cathedrals ablaze. The parchment in your hands is no longer just a relic, it's a weapon, its words carving through centuries of lies to reveal a world where sex was a battleground, desire a rebellion, and every human heart a spark that refused to be snuffed out. You're not just witnessing history, you're standing in the ashes of a war fought in bedrooms, forests and confessionals, a war for the soul of humanity. This knowledge changes you, rewires your mind, makes you question the chains you didn't even know you wore. Stay with me because this final descent will show you the cost of that fight and why it still matters today. The medieval world was a machine of domination, and sex was its sharpest tool. The church didn't just control bodies, it owned the very idea of desire, turning it into a sin that could damn you forever. Confession was a trap, a psychological cage where priests mined your soul for weaknesses. They didn't just want your sins, they wanted your shame, your fear, your submission. By the 13th century, the Inquisition had perfected this. Men and women were tortured not just for heresy, but for their private lives. Every touch, every thought, every moment of pleasure scrutinized under the threat of fire and steel. The interrogators' manuals were obsessed with sex. What did you feel? How many times? In what way? This wasn't about saving you, it was about breaking you, about making you so afraid of your own body you'd never dare defy the church's power. For men, the weight was crushing. Your manhood was your worth, measured not just in battle but in bed. Impotence wasn't a private struggle, it was a public failure, a crack in the armour of honour that could destroy you. A knight who couldn't perform might lose his title, his respect, his place among men. Peasants faced the same judgment, their failures mocked in crude songs, their names synonymous with shame. The nobility, with their secret manuals and private chambers, weren't free either. Their pleasures, described in texts like Andreas Capellanus's courtly love poems, were a dangerous rebellion against the church's rules. A noble caught in unnatural acts risked everything: excommunication, exile, death. The missionary position wasn't a choice, it was a mandate, the only act that didn't invite divine wrath. Anything else, woman on top, rear entry, was a sin, a defiance of God's order, a step toward hell. Women, though, were the true prisoners. Their bodies were currency, their sexuality a public spectacle. Margot's marriage to Henrik was no love story. It was a transaction, her virginity a commodity traded for pigs and land. The wedding night was a performance, the bloodied sheet a flag of victory for her family's honour. If it didn't appear, she faced ruin, cast out, branded a whore, or killed. The church's lies about the hymen, a solid barrier, its absence proof of sin, were a deliberate weapon, turning women's bodies into evidence of guilt. In truth, the hymen could break from labour, riding, or simply not exist. But truth was irrelevant. Control was everything. A woman's reputation hung by a thread. A glance, a rumour, a moment alone could destroy her. Adultery was her crime, punishable by death, while men could bed servants or prostitutes with no consequence. The legal system saw rape as a crime against a woman's owner, her father, husband, or lord. Not her. A noble rapist might pay a fine. A peasant who touched a noblewoman faced torture and death. But the human spirit is relentless. In the shadows, rebellion burned. The forests were a sanctuary, where made this day's pagan roots let young people steal moments of freedom. They coupled under the stars, defying the church's watchful eyes, their bodies claiming a humanity the priests sought to crush. Wise women, branded witches, were the generals of this quiet war. They taught girls to brew teas that could prevent pregnancy, to track their cycles by the moon, to ease the pain of a body cursed by the church. These secrets, passed in whispers, were a lifeline for women like Margot, trapped in a world that owned their wombs. The church called it witchcraft, but it was power, raw, defiant, human. These women risked death to give others a choice, their herbs and rituals a middle finger to a system that hated them. The supernatural was another chain. The church preached that demons, succubi and incubi, stalked the night, seducing men and women to steal their souls. A man's impure dream was a sin. A woman's nightmare was proof she was a witch. Sleep paralysis, a weight on the chest, wasn't a medical quirk. It was demonic assault, and many burned for it. This fear wasn't accidental. It was a tool designed to make you dread your own mind. Yet people fought back. The fabliaux, bawdy tales told in taverns, laughed at the church's rules, celebrating forbidden acts with defiance. These stories weren't just jokes, they were weapons, proof that the human soul could not be fully chained. Fertility rituals, blending pagan and Christian, were another rebellion. Brides were showered with grain, beds sprinkled with herbs, all to defy a world where childbirth killed 1 in 3 women. Mandrake amulets, believed to boost fertility, were so prized that markets brimmed with fakes. These acts weren't just hope, they were resistance, a refusal to let the church control life itself. The droit du seigneur, whether myth or reality, was a stark reminder of feudal power, lords claiming peasant brides as their right. Brothels, regulated yet condemned, marked their workers like livestock, forced into special clothes and inspections. Sex was a hierarchy, the powerful feasting while the powerless suffered. As we return to Margot, trembling in her candlelit cottage, we see not just a girl, but a warrior. Her body was a battlefield, her spirit the prize. The church, the nobles, the village, they all wanted her soul, but she was more than their rules, more than their fear. She was human, and humans fight. This is the truth they buried. Medieval sexuality wasn't just bizarre rituals, it was a war for power, for freedom, for the right to feel. That war never ended. It lives in you, in the rules you follow, the desires you hide, the systems that still try to chain your soul. Before we part, join this rebellion. Hit that like button, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Let's build a global tribe of truth seekers, united by our hunger for the secrets they tried to bury. You're not just a viewer, you're a keeper of dangerous knowledge, and that knowledge is power. Use it.